Hello, SPED 2010 students. I hope everyone had a great spring break and you're ready to get back at it. So, this week we're really combining 2 weeks. We are going to combine week 7 and 8. And as I mentioned before, you can go ahead and start on it if you wanted to work on it over spring break. You could do that. You will be working on behavior. So, really, we're going to be concentrating on classroom management and student behavior. So for week 7, we're really going to look at positive behavior support. And we're looking specifically at learners who maybe have emotional or behavioral disorders that accompany their disability, right? So we know that when we're looking at the different categories of disabilities that are under identified by IDA or Tennessee State Department of Education, we know that sometimes students can have multiple disabilities, or maybe they can have behavior support that's included in their IEP. So, what we want to look at is we want to support them. And what would that look like in the IEP, right? So, to do that and to have that inside the IEP, we have to figure out what their function is, the hypothesis of function, right? And create what we call a functional behavior assessment plan. And how we do that is that we gather as much information we can so we can support them. Right, so we're going to be able to provide a preventative strategy, a replacement strategy, a replacement skill to be learned, and then a new consequence for our behavior intervention plan, which is what will be inside the IEP. Now, not all students who have IEPs have a behavior intervention plan. This sometimes will happen if we have someone who may have emotional or behavioral disorder that accompanies their disability. So that's really going to be our focus in week 7. In week 8, we're going to even dive further into behavior intervention plans and looking again at those functional behavior assessments. So it really allows us to kind of pull both of these weeks together into one. So for week 7, 8, you're really going to be completing what we call the IRIS modules. So the first IRIS module is really looking at the functional behavioral assessment, right? So we're going to look and see how do we identify the reasons for problem behavior and disorders, which is going to help us develop a plan. So that's the first part. As you'll see here underneath our overview, you're going to see our keywords and concepts that we're really going to be looking at. So what is positive behavior intervention support? What does functional behavior assessments look like? What do they mean? How do I incorporate or implement them? What is ABC analysis and what does that have to do with behavior intervention support? What does manifestation determination mean? What is antecedent? We're looking at positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, extinction. All these things you're going to be seeing in not only your reading for this week, but you're also going to be looking at this inside of the IRIS module. So the first thing that you have here is under week 7, I provided you with a PowerPoint, which kind of goes a little bit in depth talking about what is behavior intervention plan, also known as BIP, or we have FBA, which stands for functional behavior assessment, right? And how these two play a role when we're looking at student success in IEPs, right? So what are the basic beliefs we have on a student when we talk about behavior, right? So, what does that behavior look like? We need to focus on those factors, right, that sustain the behavior that we're questioning because we want to replace that with something else, right? So, if they're displaying an undesired behavior, rather than looking at just the behavior itself, we really need to zero in why the student is displaying that undesired behavior. So that way we can put a plan in place. That way it allows the student to use another behavior. So that's why we say that we have to develop this plan, right? So we're defining the behavior, and then we go into talking about what are the steps of conducting a functional behavior assessment, right? So these are our 6 steps. We identify the problem, we collect our data using multiple assessments, then we have to analyze the data. After we analyze the data, we're going to look at making determinations and hypotheses. And this is really going to help us implement that plan. So we're going to develop it with a team and implement a behavior plan. And throughout the process of trying to implement this in the classroom, we have to evaluate the progress and follow up as necessary. So, those are really your main steps when we're conducting this FBA or functional behavior assessment. And it talks about it in detail here as well as in the IRIS module that is in the course. Okay, and it talks about the different types of data you're going to collect. You have indirect and then direct. Okay, so our indirect is really going to be like those interview questions that you may ask the general ed teacher or maybe the parents, right? So you're collecting that indirect data. Um, really relies heavily on teacher interviews or those who have direct contact as well as the parents, right? The direct, and here's an example of some of the questions you would ask in the interviews. The the direct assessment is really going to be your observation data. And there's different types of observation. We're really going to hone in on ABC observation and what does that stand for, and then also other types of recording that could be used during observations. So remember, the point of the observation is really to understand why the behavior is going on. Why do they engage in this behavior? What's the function? And what does ABC stand for? Well, it's antecedent or known as the trigger. You have the behavior and then you have the consequence, right? We always start the behavior with antecedent because we want to figure out what's the trigger. When is this most likely happening? That will get us to our function, right? What does the student actually do? So, what's the behavior? And then the consequence. What initially follows that behavior? So, there is a uh, YouTube video here that kind of lets you look at Joseph. And it's really going to let you see an example of some of this behavior playing out and looking at honing in on while you're watching what's the antecedent trigger, trying to figure out why Joseph is acting this way. What is the behavior he is doing? What exactly is it he's doing? And then what's the teacher doing initially afterwards? So remember, whenever you're thinking about behavior, we have to think about the consequences that are given to the student is either going to increase or decrease the probability that that behavior will continue or stop in the future. So that's the main function. That's the main goal, is to obviously decrease the unwanted behavior. That's why we have to put that behavior plan in place. So that's something you're going to look at. For homework, you will be looking at the IRIS module that I told you about. Um, you will see here, there's a link that takes you to it. You will go through it. You will also be answering questions 1 through 7 inside the assessment component, and that's what you will put into Dropbox. I also included here to give you feedback a Kahoot game. This Kahoot game is really going to just quiz you on the components that you're learning about our objectives. That way we can get a sound idea. You know, what do you really do well with? What are you understanding? Maybe some things that are confusing or you need some more information on. So this is really going to help you, I think, giving you the feedback you need to gain understanding and to look at maybe some things that you need extra attention to or pay extra attention to. So after you do that, we're going to look at week 8 because remember, we're combining both weeks for behavior. So for week 8, we're going to go a step further, right? We're really going to be honing in on how do we develop a behavior intervention plan. So there is reading from the textbook here. I want you to read chapter 8 in the Exceptional Learners textbook, which is going to help you look at intervention plans for students who have behavior, maybe some behavior issues or unwanted behavior. So after you do that, there's also a Nearpod presentation that I feel like you would watch that would help you. There's a video I included here that talks about the IE team process and what that looks like when you're implementing a behavior plan. Um, so I think that will help you a lot, as well as a presentation here that will kind of give you more insight. Now, I told you that you will have a case study here that you will look at. So when you click on it, it's going to bring up this. And this is going to show you a video. Okay, so this video is kind of like the one for Joseph. It's going to show you some behaviors that are happening that are unwanted. And it's going to help you understand how you are going to measure this behavior during the observation, because that's going to be gathering the data you need to implement a plan. So first you're going to read this section about how do you measure the behavior. Okay, so we talked about there is indirect observation data that you collect, but there's also direct. So this is specifically honing in on direct observations. So how do you measure the behavior? Well, when you measure behavior, you have to use one of these observation methods when you're recording the behavior. So you could do frequency event, interval, duration, and latency. So this really gives you an idea of the different types of direct observations you can do, how you would use this to target the behavior, include a replacement behavior for students, right? And how do you observe it? How do we measure it when we're looking at it? Well, these types of direct data recording can help you measure the behavior. That way you can put a plan in place. So you're going to read through these. After you do that, you have a video I want you to watch. Okay, this is about a little girl here. And what I want you to do as you're doing this, I want you to gather some data, right? So I gave you a sheet here to practice with. This practice sheet is going to help you become more familiar with measuring the behaviors. So when you click on it, it will download it for you and it will open up. So you should be able to type directly in here. And what I want you to do is while you're watching the video, you're going to fill out the frequency in data. We're going to look at that first, and then you're going to practice doing some interval measuring recording. So what you're going to do with frequency is we're basically honing in how many times the behavior occurs within a certain time. Now, here on the video, when you play it, you'll see the video is 5 minutes and 20 seconds long. What I want you to focus on with this is that you see here, there's like an example of time. So if you'll see here, it started at 10:30 and ended at 10:32. What I want you to do is for 2 minutes and 30 seconds, you're going to watch the video. Okay, you'll play it. Every time an unwanted behavior occurs, you're going to have to put a tally mark. And what you're going to gather is you're going to figure out what the rate is and how you do that. And all of that information is going to be from here. Okay, so let's go to frequency and event recording. Right here. This is an example. When we're doing frequency or event recording, you're going to tally how many times the behavior occurred and in what time frame. So to get your rate, like here, okay, what you have to do is you have to tally up the number of time it occurs, 18 times within 15 minutes. So 18 divided by 15 minutes, that's going to give you the rate. You're going to do the same thing here. Now, you could observe the student for 2 minutes 30 seconds, or if you choose, you could actually do the entire time, which would be 5 minutes 20 seconds. It's really up to you. If you're going to do the entire time for 5 minutes 20 seconds, then you need to put 10:30, 10:35, 20. And that's just going to help you give any rate. So I'm going to let you choose how long you choose to watch the video for. The second part is really looking at interval recording. And again, interval recording is in your guide here. So when we're doing interval recording, we're really trying to understand, right? We're trying to understand whether behavior is occurring during a specific time. That's called intervals. So let's say that you are trying to figure out if this is only happening during English, or maybe this is only happening during math or when we do station time. That lets us know when it's happening, right? So that's why we use interval recording. Now, there's two types, there's whole interval and then there's partial. Whole interval is when it's the total duration of the behavior. So, say this is happening during math. Is it happening during the entire math time or only certain times in math, period? So that's why we try to pick one of them to figure out when it's recording. Okay. So what you will do is you will use the same video here, the same child, and you're going to complete the bottom section. So how you do this is every time an unwanted behavior occurs, you're going to put a plus. If the behavior that's unwanted didn't occur, you're going to put a minus. But you have to do this every 20 seconds. So this is something important to note. In this video, every 20 seconds, you're going to hear a beep. Okay, that's called an interval. So we want to find out every 20 seconds is the behavior occurring. So if it did, put a plus. If it didn't, put a minus. And whenever it did occur and you put a plus, you're going to put exactly what she did. Maybe she talked back or she was talking to another student when she was supposed to be working alone. Okay, that's what we want you to record. Every time you hear the beep, that's 20 seconds gone. In that 20 seconds, did it occur? And what you're going to do is at the end, you're going to add up how many pluses you have, only pluses. Then you're going to put the total number, which here would be 8. So then you're going to divide the percentage of intervals, right? And what that's going to tell you is how often that is happening. Is it happening every 20 seconds or is it happening the entire time? Okay, and that's why we do interval recording. So once you get this entire sheet done, you're going to submit this to Dropbox. Okay, now remember, this is just practice. I may have you change it if you want. We're just getting started to practice this type. This takes time to learn how to do this, to sit down, but I wanted you to get a feel of what it is to observe and do this type of data implementation. That way, if you do have a student that maybe needs a behavior intervention plan and support inside their IEP, this is something that you'll become familiar with. Okay. As always, if you ever get stuck or have questions, please feel free to reach out and I'll be more than happy to help you. All right, guys. So, all of this you will be able to put inside of Dropbox. So, I'm going to show you. If you go to assessments and you go to Dropbox, you're going to see here it's going to be underneath functional behavior analysis. So, you should be able to put both the assessment questions in the IRIS module 1 through 7. You should be able to submit those, and then you should also be able, and you can just do that in a Word document. And then you also should be able to submit this data sheet as well. So you should be able to add 2 files to functional behavior analysis. All right, I hope everyone has a great week. Remember, this is due Sunday. So this will be due this Sunday, March 16th. All right, and reach out again if you have any questions. All right, guys, have a fabulous week. Until next time, take care.